Hello and welcome to the Sekimeiya Spun Glass. We left off last episode just as Atsuki was about to touch the Sekimeiya to go to the past. And well, we'll see what happens. If I can click on it. 6519. That was the last number my eyes saw before my sight blackened. Where? Touching the Sekimeiya brought back the darkness. However, I immediately discerned where I was. The place where I'd thought I'd appear. The lobby. Since there's no light, it must be nighttime. There was something on my lap, and I knew what it was. A suitcase. It was open, and both Sekimeiya were in it. It worked. Sekimeiya are here. This is everything I need to confirm this will work. I'll go back to my world, and on January 5th I'll be able to get both Sekimeiya. I could feel that my clothing hadn't changed. When I looked around me, I saw the sight I'd been longing for. The sky. As my vision adjusted, the multitude of stars above me took shape. The shutter, the barrier to the outside, was gone. I stood up, speechless. Then, slowly, I walked over to the door. I could see snow on the ground, illuminated by a handful of streetlights. It was right there, behind a screen of glass. I placed my hand on the handle and gently pushed. The door didn't open. As I'd expected, it was locked. I couldn't go to the storeroom as the hallway cameras would record me. Then, I put my hand in my pocket, hoping I would feel cold metal. Yes, it's here. It was a keyring with a dog-shaped keychain, the one I'd found in the coat of a staff member, which I could obtain on January 5th. Since it had been in the clothes that staff member had worn when entering the tower, it was possible one of the keys unlocked the door. Since I'd appeared with it, I knew one would. There were 4 keys, and one was bigger than the others. Once I found the keyhole below the handle, I inserted it. When it turned, my shoulders dropped, unable to believe the truth. I could step out of that place. And when the door opened, I did so without thinking. I was no longer in the building. There was snow around me, and I was holding the Sekimeiya. Most importantly, I had a plan I could enact successfully. A lone key was in my pocket, isolated from the set. The rusty key I'd obtained in the security room, and in my other pocket, I found money. I could only stand there, feeling the cold air hit my face. I couldn't believe I'd really been able to walk out. I'd gotten far too used to being stopped. A faint buzz hummed around me, fading into the night. I took a step forward and was assaulted by tiredness. So this is how I'll be on January 5th. I feel exhausted. And I had to go somewhere. The cold was rapidly getting to me, and the full night was still ahead. Where do I go? There's a hostel in the center of town, but I'm not sure it'll be open. I kept a replica of my keys outside my house so I could silently sneak into my parents' room and stay there without alerting my own self. That wasn't something I wanted to do though. I suppose I'll have to see. I turned around and saw a large shadow covering the stars. It was the tower, looking even bigger than I recalled. With the same key I'd used to leave, I locked the front door. Once I'd taken a few steps, all light was gone. Fortunately, I could navigate the streets without a problem. I walked, unable to hear any sounds beyond my own steps. As I got closer to the center, more faint lights dotted the streets. Soon, I stepped into the widest street and approached a building I'd never been to. There was a sign above the door. It read Eagle Hostel. Is it closed? I don't see anyone. There was a bell near it, so I pressed it. I waited, wondering if the sound had reached anyone. It took me a while to discern that a tall man was approaching me. He turned on the lights and opened the door from the inside, his eyes showing that he'd been about to fall asleep. Sorry, would it be possible for me to spend the night here? You don't have a reservation? No, something just came up and I have nowhere to stay. We have spare rooms, but it's 8,000 yen a night. About 60 euros? That's fine, I might have to stay a few days. I suddenly looked down at myself and noticed that my clothes still had very faint traces of smoke on them, although I thought not identical to how they'd been before traveling. I paid one night's rate and was given 2 keys, one for the hostel and another for a bedroom. My attention was immediately grabbed by a digital clock on the table. It was 22:54 on November 24th, a Thursday. Can't believe it. I travelled 3 weeks to the past. Within the tower, anything had seemed possible. However, with the effect reflected in the real world, my mind couldn't accept it. Both Sekimeiya were in the suitcase, and the smell of the tower still hung around me. The room was linked to a bathroom with a shower and a kitchen. I had a lot of things to think about, but my body dropped on the bed, giving me no chance to do so. Wait, the money. I have to duplicate it. I'd paid for a single night, so I had to duplicate that amount and then the entire sum. I got out of bed and approached the suitcase. They've been outside for so long, I'm sure they don't have a lot of energy. I should be able to touch one without the range reaching anyone else here. I wonder which is the future one. If I touch the past one, I'll just appear in the bathroom and stay there until my past self leaves. I'd undressed before getting in bed, since the room was warm. If I replicated my past location, the money I'd been holding would duplicate. I placed the suitcase on the bed and separated both gemstones. Then I touched one of them in the center of the room. My vision went dark, but I could hear something. I wasn't alone. Wait, is this? My bedroom. Not the hostel's, but the one in my house. When I glanced at the source of the sound, I saw my own body sleeping in my bed. What? Why am I here? I slowly stepped back, unable to take my eyes off myself. It was November. That self of mine hadn't yet reunited with Shiria and Mia. By the time I reached the door, I started to understand what had happened. My clothes changed. I went to the future. I think I traveled farther than I expected. Maybe the Sekimeiya were gathering energy inside the suitcase even though the outside was so chilly. I must have traveled more than 15 minutes through time, so the replicated location was from a time before I appeared in the lobby, when I was about to sleep in my own world. Trying to prevent myself from being noticed, I approached the front door. It seemed I had replicated my body on November 24th, and it was fortunate I'd appeared when I'd already fallen asleep. I felt the handle and opened the door. The sky brimmed with stars and my clothes were no longer protecting me from the freezing air. I'd left the hostel bedroom empty, so I ran there. Once again I had to ring the bell to enter. To my surprise, an older woman opened the door. Sorry, I had to go out for a bit. Where's the man from before? Oh, old Stanley. He sticks to a strict sleep schedule. Next time don't ring the bell, just knock. He gets mean when you wake him up. Along with you now. The Sekimeiya was still on the bed. It was without a doubt the future one, as the clock showed 23:29. I didn't change worlds, so the range of the other Sekimeiya didn't reach me. I hope nobody else traveled with me. I sat on the bed and panted, each inhalation bringing lancing pain. I was very tired and it took me a second to process why. The replicated location had been from when the past me was about to go to sleep, so I wanted to do the same. I didn't actually duplicate the money. My old clothes were beside the bed, but I had to reset the Sekimeiya before attempting it again. I sat up and walked to the kitchen. Oh, there's a refrigerator here. It was running, so I knew it would work to cool off the Sekimeiya. After putting both of them inside, I grabbed the money from the pocket of my other pants. I took the future Sekimeiya back out and waited a few seconds. Then, I left the money on the floor and felt the surface of the gemstone. My sight hardly changed, but I knew I'd teleported. I was holding the stack of money and the original bills were on the floor. I could use them while I kept the duplicated ones until January 5th. I have to duplicate a night's worth too, since I already paid for it. The future Sekimeiya was still powered off. I reset it to repeat the process, and once I'd duplicated the full amount of money, I left both Sekimeiya in the refrigerator again. I fell to the bed. I didn't bother taking off my clothes the second time since they were a lot lighter than before. Before I knew it, I could see the sun through the window. I looked at the clock, trying to remember where I was. It was 10:09, November 25th. It all came back to me when I saw those blurry numbers. I quickly got out of bed and checked the Sekimeiya in the refrigerator. It doesn't seem like the Sekimeiya heat up inside, so they're fine here. November 25th. On this day I hadn't even received Mia's call yet. Right now I was at home, all alone. I felt a little dizzy, so I put on my original clothes and walked out of the room to a cafeteria I'd seen downstairs. Fortunately, I had enough money to cover all the days I needed. Random thought that I had earlier when he duplicated the money. Surely the sort of numbers on the bills would be the same as the ones they're copied from, obviously. So if someone actually looked at them, they would realize that they're... I guess, would they be fake? They're not really fake. They would realize there's something wrong with it there. Obviously, normally you don't go around, checking and comparing bills all the time whenever you receive one. But if someone noticed, something could happen. Once I felt rested, I went back up. I sat on the bed and went over what I would do. I'm in the past of the world where Mia was alive. If I don't change the past, will she not die? Or was she in the tower for another reason? I have the Sekimeiya, so maybe I should see what happens on the 30th. And then go to the past. I can't risk the plan getting ruined due to a difference in the events that I'm not aware of. If what happened on the 30th repeats, why would Mia have been in the tower? Is there an explanation for that? The concept of different worlds I have is rough, but I was thinking of something. If I save Mia, my plan was to go back to my initial world, as I couldn't stay in this one. That would allow this world to exist at the very least. But after saving her, I could travel to the other world with Mia, which would result in the same effect. The other world would end up with her, while this one wouldn't. I couldn't bring myself to do that though. I'd already accepted Mia's death once. Even if I was able to bring her to our world, would that truly be better? I would just create avoidable pain in another. However, in other words, I believe it's possible the Mia in the tower came from a different world, from one in which she didn't die. That would explain why she was there with no influence of mine. Everything regarding other worlds was too hypothetical. I had to stick to what I'd planned. I'll make sure she doesn't die. I'll make this world into the one we wanted. Then I'll have to abandon it, but at least I'll know it exists. After November 30th, I'll go back in time and prevent her death. After that, I'll change worlds, hopefully arriving in the one I was in. If that works, I won't want to change the past. My goal will be to find the real Schrödinger, who I'm sure will be there at one point. Maybe when she disappeared with Naomi, or maybe when she was in the tower with different clothes. At the end of it all, we can leave together. I kind of feel like that won't work. So, I will probably say that. Will it work? Will it not work? Who knows? Won't work. Will this work? The most delicate part is altering the story of this world. When I changed the past, it was clear the result wasn't straightforward. It almost created a mesh of realities. Some people kept them. The sudden realization shattered all my thoughts. No, what am I thinking? I didn't change the past at all. I decided I'd try to change the past after I suffered that strange injury in the elevator. I used Sekimeiya to travel more than half an hour to the past. I began to walk toward the event room to check the time, but voices stopped me. I got close to the door and focused my hearing. It just suddenly ran over. Honestly, I wasn't sure. I recognized the conversation. I'd arrived approximately a couple minutes before the point only Sai had traveled. It was a couple minutes before Sai disappeared from before us. In other words, a couple minutes before we changed worlds. To change the past, I produced a sound in hallway A. A sound we'd never heard. When I slammed the door, I thought I changed the past because we hadn't heard that sound in the event room. But the reason we didn't hear it was because we'd gone to a different world. And in that world, I ended up taking the elevator up to follow Schrödinger. That must have been when we came back. For some reason we went back to our world. That's what that injury must have signified. The elevator stopped abruptly because it wasn't moving in our world, and I cut myself with the handrail as my body overlapped with it. It couldn't have been going too fast, but as it ceased all movement, it propelled us upward and we slammed to the floor. I felt my right hand burning. I looked at it and saw a cut. What? You're bleeding. I could only process the intense pain coming from the wound. While I couldn't comprehend how it had happened, I understood that I had cut my hand with the handrail when our bodies lifted, as it had been right above me. And that was the exact world we'd been in before. The past Sekimeiya was back in the staff room where I'd hidden it. It didn't teleport back there. Akaru was gone and Sai was once again the person we'd been with in the event room. Also, the blood I would leave on the staircase must have already been there. The doors opened, so I dashed out of the elevator as fast as I could, forcing my eyes shut to suppress the pain. So when I went back in time and produced that new sound, I didn't actually change anything. When I slammed the door, the event room was already empty. And then despite the difference I would have caused, Aaron and I still got out of the elevator on the 3rd floor. I thought I'd created an incomprehensible mess of memories, but now I understand. It seemed like only Sai remembered the effect of my change because he was the only person there when I slammed the door. For him, the blood in the hallways was always there, whereas for Aaron and me it wasn't before we took the elevator. I looked next to us, and as I thought, the other trail of blood was coming from the elevator. It was from the time I'd gone down after suffering the injury. The floor was proof of both realities at once. What the hell? This means that I still have no idea if the past can be changed. No. There's no way, is there? All that must mean it's not possible. It wasn't changed a single time. When I produced the Sekimeiya's travel formula, I'd made use of hypothetical worlds all different from each other, but the real one never changed. I was out of my mind when I tried it with the storeroom door. I could travel to the past and close a door I've seen open, but if the past can't be changed, the explanation for that could be that I'd die of a sudden heart attack or something like that. There's no other way to know but to try it though, and doing so is incredibly risky. Now what? Technically, I could never die after traveling to the past, or else there'd be no future location to replicate. Would I die by touching the Sekimeiya then? There's no way to verify any of this. I was suddenly stuck, with no way to know whether what I wanted to accomplish was achievable. At the very least, my past travels seemed to confirm that I'd be alive on January 5th and January 26th. Is there a way to increase or decrease the chance that it's possible to change the past? Confirming it seems like it's off the table. I went to the kitchen where I had both Sekimeiya. I grabbed them and determined which one was the past one. What can I really do to check this? There was a salt shaker next to the stove. I think this is all I can do. I left it on the floor of the bedroom. Then I stepped back to the kitchen and closed the door. I waited a few minutes, thinking about what I would do. Once I was certain, I took out the past Sekimeiya and looked at the bedroom. The salt shaker was no longer on the floor. It was on the rightmost nightstand, next to a bunch of salt scattered around. I looked at it intensely. I'd known it was going to be there. Then, I waited a bit before I touched the Sekimeiya in the kitchen. When I did, I went a few minutes back in time. Huh? I appeared in the bathroom. Silently, I glanced at the bedroom. The salt shaker was on the floor next to the closed door. I picked it up and slowly brought it to the nightstand. There was no salt in it. Its wooden surface was perfectly clean. So far, I've experienced both what occurs when you travel to the past with no intentions to change it, and when you travel to the past with intentions to specifically not change it. What I don't know is what happens when you travel to the past wanting to change it, when all your actions have that intent. This might be a safe way to finally know. I gripped the salt shaker and held it over the nightstand. If I shake my hand, a bunch of salt will fall out. I've already seen a pattern of the scattered salt. However, my intention is not to repeat it. I want the past to change. I wish for that pattern to differ. Abruptly, I shook my hand, releasing countless bits of salt. What would happen was not my call. I wanted the past to change. If that was possible, I hoped the pattern would be different. If it wasn't possible, although I wouldn't do it on purpose, the pattern would be the same one I'd seen. The decision of whether the past would change was not mine. The universe would let me know instead. When my hand stopped still, I stared down. It was identical. Every last bit of salt had ended up exactly where I'd seen it, despite my wishes to change history. But isn't that completely obvious? Like, why would just wishing it... Like, okay, let me get this right. He went to... Timeline, I don't know. Anyway, he wanted the salt to be, like, on the nightstand. He wanted, salt to be spread around, whatever. He didn't do that himself. He just saw it there because he, thought that's what he would do. Obviously, when he then actually goes and does it, that's the exact way it would fall. What would wishing to change the past do? Nothing. It makes no sense. Why would it appear differently? You'd have to physically do something to change it. Like, I don't know, take one piece of salt and move it somewhere else. Maybe then, like, it's still possible that the past can't be changed. Maybe then something in the past would have been different. Maybe the salt shaker wouldn't have appeared on the nightstand. Whatever, I don't know. But just the way he did it, I see no reason at all why that would change the past. I see. I could blow on it. I could make it change. However, that's impossible. Anyone who would blow on it wouldn't have made it here in the first place. Yeah, that's what I was kind of referring to. If he wanted to change it by physically doing something to it, then he wouldn't have been able to go to the past, future, to the future, where the salt was already like spread out like that to begin with. But now he's already there. So why not blow on it? Like, yeah, I know, in theory, if he was gonna do that, he wouldn't have made it here, but he has made it here. Sometimes I don't know. With my head down, I walked back to the bathroom. Like, the universe can't retroactively not let him travel there. Soon, my past self came out of the kitchen. He saw the salt pattern and went back in time. It's funny, I thought I would appear in the bedroom instead, but I appeared in the bathroom. Because I had no urge to leave, I had no idea what to do after that. Eventually, I had to go eat something. When I got back, I sat on the bed, unable to clear my mind. And when I went to sleep, I was just as lost. The past couldn't be changed, so there was no point to anything. I got up wearing the same clothes. With a persistent feeling of impotence, I went down to the cafeteria. After everything I'd been through, saving Mia was still impossible. However, I had seen her in the tower. That was the wild card, and it was what confused me the most. Did she really come from another world? Had her existence been another mere illusion? I did all I could to refuse that. If there was something I was sure of, it was that it wasn't up to me. It was evident the universe itself was what decided the outcome of everything. A large part of my plan had been ripped to shreds, but the last bit was still in my mind. I could reunite with Shirya. We could go back to our world and leave together. For that, I could change worlds at that very moment, but I knew everything would repeat. So in the world I was in on December 15th, Mia would be in the tower. I had to see that with my very own eyes. (12:43) November 28th. I hadn't left the hostel once. I mustered the will to get up and mindlessly exited the room. It'll happen in 2 days. Am I really not going to do anything just because I've convinced myself that there's no point? It wasn't just that. I knew there was no point, and I didn't want to live through it again. When I came back up, all I could do was fall on the bed again. I shouldn't change was now. I have to wait here. There are many days left until the 15th. It's November 28th, so the Sekimeiya were found just yesterday. Wait, this is wrong. That can't be the case. I ran to the kitchen, but I stopped myself before I opened the refrigerator. No, I shouldn't open it. I have to think this through first. I entirely failed to consider this. Kate told us the Sekimeiya were found on November 27th. That's impossible though, I have them right here. In the attic when I made a Sekimeiya travel with me, I couldn't duplicate it. The original one disappeared as soon as I appeared. Only one version of each can exist. So when I appeared with them on the 24th, the ones on the mountain must have disappeared. It's already the 28th, so there's no way they were found yesterday. I stared at the shut door. The Sekimeiya must have been inside, but the past couldn't be changed. That meant that I couldn't witness its interior before thinking, as I hadn't actually seen the Sekimeiya since 3 days prior. If I opened the door and either saw them there or didn't see them there, it would be a fact locked in place. Not knowing for sure whether they were there or not was far smarter. It doesn't make any sense. I know the incident will occur on the 15th, so the Sekimeiya had to have been found. Schrödinger's Sekimeiya. The event was announced tomorrow on the 29th. That can't happen if the Sekimeiya aren't found on the 27th. However, it would happen. It had to, or else everything would have been entirely different on the 15th. The tower had to be shut on the 15th, and I had to be there. That was how I could find Mia and the real Shirya. But I had the Sekimeiya. If that had removed the ones on the mountain, the butterfly effect would surely be immense. That was why I had to consider a certain question, and why I hadn't opened the refrigerator. Was there a way for the Sekimeiya to have been found the day before? Is there any chance? If they were found, they can't be here anymore. Similarly, if they're here, they couldn't have been found. Is it impossible? That can't be. There was one important fact. I knew where the Sekimeiya had been found. Kate had described an area that matched with a place I knew very well. If they're here right now, I could travel to the past and appear with them again as long as I know I'll have them in the future. Then I could leave them on the mountain before the 27th. That doesn't work though. The past would be changing. If I ever appear with them in the past, the ones in here would disappear, and I wouldn't be able to travel in the first place. It's not possible. They couldn't have been found yesterday. But the past can't change, can it? Does that mean they're not in the refrigerator anymore? If I never open it, should I assume that they made it to the mountain somehow? What if someone traveled to the past after I did, holding the Sekimeiya? That's a way they could have disappeared from here. Was something like that what I had to assume? How the hell had the Sekimeiya even ended up on that mountain? And why had they even gotten to Ashia Tower given their powers? I recalled what Kate had told us. Eventually, up the mountain is a small field that's pretty well hidden. It's not easy to spot, and you have to deviate onto a smaller path. All I was told was that it's a fairly hidden place. There, this was found. What he pointed at was the third Sekimeiya, the one that didn't work. Where the hell did that one come from? There were 3 Sekimeiya since that morning. What really happened on the 27th? Were those 3 Sekimeiya found? And is that really the same place Shirya and I used to go to? It can't be that only the 3rd Sekimeiya was found. When Kate told us that story, he must have been talking about all the Sekimeiya. They were all found by the same person. However, Kate never mentioned any other Sekimeiya existing that entire day, and I'm sure that he and Naomi knew about it. So technically, I might have a way to make Kate's words reality, that the Sekimeiya was found on the 27th. I only have to assume that he avoided saying when the others were. If the first one was found on the 27th, this makes sense. There was another assumption I had to make, that I was no longer in possession of the future Sekimeiya. Finally, when the loop I had to make was in my head, I was ready to open the door. A single Sekimeiya was there. It's the past Sekimeiya. This is all I can do to fix my mistake. I took it out as I glanced at the clock. I could still go to the past. I could make it back to the 27th. Once there, I had to take the future Sekimeiya out of the refrigerator and bring it to the mountain so that it would be found on that day. Then, after the point I travel, the past Sekimeiya will have to be left there too. It'll be found after the 27th, but that doesn't contradict anything that we were told. The temperature in the hostel wasn't the same as the towers, so the amount of time I had to store was different. Fortunately, the formula was the same, so after I noted down how far I traveled after storing 2 minutes, I knew how long I had to wait to make it a day back. It was a little over half an hour, but I couldn't touch it there due to the large range that would form. I'm certain it still gathers energy outside if it's in the suitcase, because when I touched the Sekimeiya after arriving here, I traveled a lot farther into the future than expected. But still, it wouldn't, you can't test how far you travel inside the hostel room and then go put it in the suitcase and expect that to be the same amount of time. Sure, it would be more time stored than in the refrigerator or in a very cold environment just outside, but it would definitely be less than in the hostel room. It's still winter, it's end of November, it's not going to be more than 6-7 degrees outside probably, Celsius. So surely that time would differ from a hostel room that I imagine is probably about 21-22 degrees. Below, I stepped out of the hostel for the first time and walked toward one of the tallest mountains I could see past the buildings. I walked until Irun's slope was before me, close to Ashia Tower. Far in the past there had been a path up the mountain, but I could no longer distinguish it. When I stepped up, my feet sank deep into the snow. The layer there was much thicker, and it showed clear signs of human presence. Soon the trees began to cast many shadows around me, but I hadn't lost track of where I was. My legs continued moving autonomously until the sun was visible again. This place. A vast field surrounded by trees. It had been quite a few years since I'd been there, as evidenced by the tall grass that had grown in. This is where the Sekimeiya were found. I can't believe it. How is that even possible? This was our special place. I trudged along and arrived at a cabin tucked next to the tree line. Now this place hasn't changed much. Who had been the last person to open that door? The inside looked exactly like the cabin in my memories. After taking a closer look at the place, I noticed something thrown away in a corner. It was a stuffed tiger, much smaller than I recalled. It didn't seem damaged, and it looked at me with the same smile as always. Sitting on the wood, it appeared to be waiting for Shirya to come back and put him in the small pocket of his school bag, from where he would peek out at the vast mountain landscape. I stepped back out and opened the suitcase. Opened the suitcase and looked at the clock. It was 14:03. After that, I tested how far I'd travel if I kept the Sekimeiya in the suitcase for 2 minutes. Okay, good. I peered inside the cabin next to the door. When I looked outside, I saw myself in the middle of the field. 35 seconds later, I disappeared. I see. Why did he test how far he would travel in the hostel room then to begin with? So I'll have to keep it in the suitcase for about 40 minutes. I want to make it to yesterday morning. The Sekimeiya was on the grass next to the suitcase and the clock. I put it inside at 14:05. I had to leave the suitcase there. Surprisingly, the cabin made for a good shelter from the cold. It had a bed and a hatch in the floor, leading to an empty basement. There was much less dust than I had imagined, but I busied myself wiping it off. I couldn't get over the fact that the Sekimeiya had been found there, but perhaps I was too full of myself for thinking that it could have been anything more than a coincidence. I spent the last stretch sitting on a bed. I could see the suitcase through the window, and at 14:43 I stood up. I grabbed the clock and walked outside. I'll have to touch it as soon as I open the suitcase. I locked my eyes on those numbers. As soon as 14:45 appeared, I opened it. That time when my right hand reached for the Sekimeiya, my left one gripped the suitcase's handle. In an instant, the sun disappeared. I was in the hostel, and seconds later I noticed a faint noise surrounding me. It was my own self sleeping. When I glanced at the clock, I saw the red numbers I'd expected. 7:01, November 27th. I felt the hostel keys in my pocket, and my hands weren't empty. One was holding the suitcase, while the other had a replica of the clock. However, its screen was blank. This again. I'd held them when I touched the Sekimeiya so that they wouldn't remain on the field. Only the past Sekimeiya had been left there so that it was found later. I stepped to the kitchen without making noise. When I opened the refrigerator, I saw both Sekimeiya. I grabbed the one on the left, the future Sekimeiya. I suppose I have to hurry. I didn't see the future Sekimeiya in the field, which means that it'll be taken today. Put it in the suitcase and walked out. The sun was beginning to rise. I took the same route back to Irun. I walked up, carving a path through the trees. Eventually, I stopped myself and looked back. I'm leaving the traces of footprints I saw. I kept going up until I arrived at the field, covered by the shadows cast by the tall trees. Before I got to the cabin, I took the Sekimeiya out and left it on the ground. I'm sure I would have seen it if it had still been here. Now it's a lot dustier in here. I suppose that makes sense. I have to stay until I can return to the hostel. I had to spend a full night inside. I've done it in the past, but the story from earlier in 2011 made me feel a little unnerved at the prospect. It'll be fine. It's not so cold that I'm going to freeze, and it's only one night. It was nothing new. I just had to wait there like I'd been doing in the hostel. Strangely, the cabin made it easy. The memories all came to me as I stared at the little tiger on the floor. I didn't want to take him with me. Tuna and I would come back for the one in our world. After a while, I removed the dust from all the wooden furniture, doing my best not to breathe in. The clock I had wasn't working, so I had to rely on the sun to know the time. Before I'd set, what I'd been expecting finally happened. Through the window, I saw an old man emerging from the trees. He slowly got closer, stunned by the place he'd discovered. When I saw his face, I recognized him. He was the owner of Musashi Gemstones. He stopped in the middle of the field. He crouched down, and I saw the Sekimeiya between his gloves. What the hell is going to happen with it? I know it'll be found out that cold temperatures needed not to damage it, but will it really be brought to Ashia with no understanding of its powers? Wait, is he coming in here? The door to the cabin opened. Keeping my mouth shut, I waited until it closed again. Then I emerged from below. I could see the man walking away through the window. That's it then. Everything happened as intended. Of course the past didn't change. Well, I mean, of course it didn't, because you didn't want it to change. You specifically tried to not change it. Of course it didn't change. I'm still not saying that it definitely has to be possible that the past can change. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying he's doing everything he can to not make it happen. I sighed faintly before falling back on the bed. Getting really hungry, and I don't have water either. At the very least, I became tired fairly quickly. Soon, light stopped coming through the window, disappearing along with my awareness. It was the third time I'd woken up on November 28th of 2011. I felt exhausted, and I had to walk all the way down the mountain path again. I should go as soon as possible, seeing as I still have some energy. I need to eat and use the bathroom too. Yawning, I put the clock in the suitcase and drowsily moved through the rows of trees. The sun was well past the mountains, so I'd slept for a long time. I entered the streets of Yushibana and walked to Eagle Hostel. I quickly looked at the time. It was 10:29. There's still a while until my past self comes to the cafeteria, so I can be there until then. It was a free buffet, so nobody would be surprised by my eating habits when I came back down. I took my time, only accepting that I was full once about an hour had passed. I waited, hidden from view, until my past self came down. Soon after I left, I reappeared from the stairs, holding the suitcase and wearing an uneasy expression. Finally, I could go back up. I unlocked the bedroom and staggered in. I don't have the Sekimeiya anymore. Now I can only change worlds on December 15th. I'd had them sitting in the refrigerator for so long without using them. It was undeniable that I could have obtained anything with them. Sai had once talked about winning the lottery with ease. But I hadn't worried about that because of the single guarantee that I had. On January 5th, I would have both Sekimeiya. I can't rest easy for today just yet. In the afternoon, I have to make sure to be in possession of the keys, clock, and suitcase. Otherwise, they would have disappeared when I touched the Sekimeiya on Irun. Two days passed. It was November 30th, a day that would never fade from my memory. The Sekimeiya event had been announced the previous day, so everything would happen in the same way. I didn't leave the room. By the time the evening came, I was stuck in a loop of reliving the explosion and its aftermath, shaking my head to drive those thoughts away and having them return not long after. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. If I tried to, I would have failed miserably. I attempted to close my eyes, doubting I would ever fall asleep. (7:11), December 1st. I'd gotten new batteries for the clock and confirmed it was accurate. I gingerly rubbed my eyes, grateful that I'd at least been able to sleep a little. When I fully regained my senses, I quickly got up and dashed out of the room. The news. I need to see what happened. I had a fact to work with. Mia would exist on December 15th. Nervous at what I'd find, I intently watched television. The news was just starting. Before I could think, I saw text scrolling horizontally. Gas explosion in Yoshibana. At a low volume, a reporter began to talk about it. Last night, a gas explosion occurred at a gem shop in Yoshibana. An unknown individual released smoke that knocked 4 people unconscious, and sometime later the explosion occurred due to a gas heater that had depleted its surrounding oxygen. Given the size of the explosion, the flame had been out before the smoke's release. Since everyone present was unconscious, nobody was able to recognize the artificial smell of the gas, which had no way to leave the enclosed space. At 2100, when the lights were turned on, a dust explosion occurred due to the smoke and gas. Its impact hit 2 young girls who'd fallen unconscious, 19 and 20 years of age. One of them was taken to the hospital after falling through the broken floor, but her condition is stable as she was shielded by a shelf. The body of the other girl has not yet been found, but the chances that she is alive are slim. The other 2 people, a 19-year-old boy and the owner of the shop, were far enough from the heater that they avoided major damage. The identity of the person who released the smoke is being investigated, as is their motive. Despite the outcome, it is unlikely that the explosion was intentional, and nothing has been reported as stolen. I see. This is before they found her jaw. I don't even know why I thought I could expect anything else. After hearing everything again, my heart dropped into a black abyss. It almost felt like I'd been told the news for the first time again. I really was powerless. The immense power I'd been able to wield meant nothing. Over 2 weeks were left until the 15th. Miserable, I shut myself in the bedroom. Knowing what was coming wasn't enough. I wound up isolating myself from the world in the exact same way I had the first time. I wanted to see Shiria. My thoughts were a mess, but all the uncertain possibilities ahead of me made me listless. The next time I stepped out of the hostel was on December 9th, Friday. Late in the evening, there was a place I wanted to go. On the 15th, I would be able to use the Sekimeiya again. That meant that I had to be there, and that the past would repeat. However, naturally, I couldn't be in the lobby with everyone else. I had to enter the other way. Ashia Tower was before me. I could see people through the door and light behind all the windows. The Sekimeiya have to be inside. Ashia are waiting for Sin's attack. If I found them, perhaps I could change worlds before the incident, even though that wasn't my goal. I felt the rusty surface of a key in my pocket. I would have to use it to enter the tower without being seen. First though, I stepped into the lobby. After being checked for any devices, I approached the reception desk and bought an entry pass to the hallways. I wanted to enter the tower in case I could pinpoint the Sekimeiya's location. I was curious to know if both had been found. However, I was met with a forbidden entry sign on the door to the event room. As expected, they're keeping it in here. I shouldn't bother checking inside. That could bring me problems, and there's no way only one was found anyway. I knew the cameras around me were displaying my image in the security room. Kate shouldn't have been there, but someone was watching my movements. I wonder if whoever's in the security room also knows about the storeroom's secret. As if I was visiting the place normally, I entered a few crystal rooms and looked through their cabinets. All the gemstones were the same as on the 15th. Then, as I went through hallway A, I stopped myself before the storeroom. I opened its door curiously and peeked inside. I wanted to see if my key would unlock the door. When I'd been in the tower, it hadn't unlocked that exit from the inside. I closed the door behind me and rapidly opened the secret wall. The handle was there, and with the rusty key inserted into the keyhole, a rough turn unlocked it. The door opened. Through a small gap I could see the snowy grass next to the tower. I frowned, but I couldn't waste time. As if nothing had happened, I stepped back to the hallway. A few people there didn't seem to mind me, so I walked back to the lobby. Why did it not work on the 15th? No matter how much I tried, the lock wouldn't budge. Whatever the reason was, it had worked in my favor. Kate had been able to escape, and if he had, when the others found the door, they would have been able to get out too. With things like that, I wouldn't have been able to figure out the mechanics behind the Sekimeiya. I couldn't be calm though. If the key wouldn't work on the 15th, perhaps I wouldn't be able to enter the tower. I haven't seen you here before, have I? Have you taken a look at this? I was about to step out when a voice called for me. It was the receptionist who held out a green paper that I recognized. The Sekimeiya event, right? I've heard about it, yes. I'm glad you have. Have you decided if you'll come back? I might. Fantastic. I'll see you there then. Huh. Wasn't there a scene in like chapter 1 when they entered the tower? Wasn't there something with the receptionist going like, I feel like I recognize you or something like that? I feel like that was a thing. It was definitely somewhere. Well, Naomi wasn't the receptionist anyway. Wait. Receptionist. Not found. Was it in chapter 2? Oh, obviously it wasn't his original world, because he is now not in his original world, so it wouldn't have been that receptionist. It would have been a different receptionist. Yep, there it is. Oh, I'm glad to see you're back. I hope you enjoy the event. Interesting. Okay. I grabbed the flyer as she waved. By the time I stepped out of the building, the sun was completely gone. Only the cold was left, and nobody was outside. I walked to the left side of the building, hearing the woman's words replay in my mind. Fantastic, I'll see you there then. I did see her. I remember that. I went to the wall where the secret door was. Stepping on the tall grass, I felt the surface of the wall carefully until I was next to the storeroom. This is the door. I can see the keyhole too. I'd left it slightly open so it had been easy to find. With the key I verified that I could lock and unlock it from the outside. It works. I should be able to enter through it as long as it still works on the 15th. I walked away with the uneasiness that the receptionist's words had caused. I'll see you there then. When Shiri and I stepped into the tower, she didn't react to me at all. We were there extremely early and spent hours in the lobby, but it was as if she'd never seen me. That makes sense, of course. In that world, she had never seen me. But in this one, when Shiri and I entered the tower, the receptionist won't react the same way, will she? Because of the brief conversation we just had. Didn't that mean that I changed the past? I changed something that I'd experienced in the other world. I began to walk somewhere. Of course this world isn't identical. What happened on the 15th was different, but none of that was related to my presence, was it? There might have been a big mistake in my reasoning. Oh, you don't say. Why was I not able to change the salt pattern? Because I had already seen it. In that sense, the past couldn't be changed. However, in this world I never did experience the wait in the lobby before the hallway doors opened. I could have caused that event to differ from my world's, but I never truly changed this world's history. I came to a very familiar street. It was my own, and I could see my house far ahead. There was light between two of the windows. Our sleep schedule was all over the place. I spent most nights awake. I couldn't see my own outline, but I remembered staring through that window every night. For that reason, the image I'd always seen was still engraved in my mind. I got closer to my house, hiding myself behind the gate. A lot of snow had piled up on it. Without thinking twice, I shook it all off. I was right. I changed my past, but not the past of the Atsuki from this world. In my memories, the snow piled on the gate never fell. No rule had changed. I hadn't erased what I'd lived through. What had once happened couldn't be reversed. However, I truly had power in the world I was in. It was a real second chance. I couldn't change my own past, but I had just changed the other Atsuki's past. I'd thought that everything would happen as the universe had decided, that my input would always be meaningless. But that wasn't the case. I'd taken an action all by myself and changed something. I looked up. Did that mean that I could have saved Mia? If I hadn't waited in the hostel, could I have prevented her death? Yes, you could have. Which is the reason why Mia still exists and, well, still lives in one of those three worlds, I imagine. Even if that was the case, I'd already failed. I'd failed to do it, and it was irreversible. Also correct, because by this time, this Atsuki also knows that she died. With this Atsuki, I mean the one we currently are. So now he can't change it anymore, for this world. But there is still one world left to go. Because I had seen the news. I'd witnessed history of the world I was in, so it was no longer any different from my own. I'd had a chance, and I'd failed to notice it. The reporter had spelled out my negligence. I hadn't acted, so nothing had changed. Oh, that can't be. It's the same case. Even though I have seen the news, in this world I've never seen any physical indication that Mia is dead. That was the biggest barrier in my world, and it doesn't exist here. The news report is the only real obstacle, and it's a crossable one. Also, kind of true, just makes it a bit harder, because the explosion still has to happen. It's just that he has to somehow get Mia out of there. Wait, how did they... Wait. I guess maybe they talked to some of the people afterwards. Because I was just thinking, how did they know there were 4 people in there if they didn't find anything of Mia? But probably Atsuki or the store manager told the news afterwards. Or told someone and they told the news. So Atsuki... But that all happened before they fell unconscious. Like, if someone had taken Mia out after they fell unconscious, there's still a chance to remove her from the whole situation. If nothing has been found of her yet. I no longer had the Sekimeiya. I couldn't travel back to the 30th. However, if I could, Mia's death could be averted without the need to change the past. It isn't yet an impossibility. And I knew everything that I lived through would repeat, so I could be certain that on the 15th I would have the Sekimeiya for myself. Finally, it made sense and my eyes went wide. The reason why Mia had been in the tower. I understood everything, as it all aligned with what I had to do. I arrived at the hostel, where I could be isolated from the world. Until I was certain about everything, I couldn't look at the news. Everything had to be in my head before the result was given to me.